Classified Crime is on the case of Sarah Boone, and today let's take a look at her phone call logs since she has transferred to Lowell Correctional. Here is the public records request I submitted back on May 12th, 2025. You can pause and read it, but basically I sent a Hail Mary request for her phone call logs, audio recordings of calls, electronic messages or emails, and behavioral logs since her transfer date at Lowell Correctional on December 30th, 2024, until the date of the request on May 12th, 2025. On May 28th, 2025, I received the response showing that the call log was available and attached, but the audio recordings and electronic messages were not available under public records request. And the behavior log had nothing that matched my request or no files at the time my request was processed. So that brings us to the phone call logs. There are 39 pages of call logs between January 2nd, 2025 and ending May 28th, 2025. I did make a few notes on the call log, and I will explain those as we come to them. I also decided to start from January and work our way to May. So I will be moving from the last page to the first page because they are organized by most recent calls to the older calls in the file that they sent. So let's take a look. As you can see, this report was printed on May 28th, 2025 at 3:31:05 p.m. I have redacted all of the phone numbers. They redacted the PIN numbers, but you can see they have the first column is the number of calls. So there are 752 total calls. You can see the phone number. There's 2 PIN numbers, inmate's first and last name, the date, the phone she's calling from, the result, the time the call was made, and then the duration of the call, the site ID, which is always going to be the same, and the call type. So they have prepay, free courtesy, free marketing, and we'll look at those. The total amount of time duration of phone calls is 87 hours, 5 minutes, and 6 seconds since January 2nd, 2025 up through the time this report was printed. Okay, so the first call that Sarah made January 2nd, 11:11 a.m. was to Julian Delapine of Delapine Creative, and it was not accepted. She then called Peter from Delapine Creative at 11:15, not accepted. Julian again, 11:18, not accepted. 11:57, she tried Julian again, not accepted. And then she finally got a hold of Peter at 11:59 on January 2nd. They talked for 7 minutes, 6 seconds, and then Peter hung up. Then she called Lana, and they talked for a full 30 minutes. And here it says time up. So that can mean either they've reached the 30-minute maximum time limit or she's out of credits and has run out of prepaid time because these are all prepaid calls. I think there's a certain day of the week maybe that they have free calls. So then on the 3rd, she tried to call her son and she talked to him for about 20 minutes. He hung up. And then she tried to call Christina Pena on the 3rd twice, and there was no answer. She tried Christina again on the 3rd, and no answer. She then called Lana twice. It was not accepted. She then called Christina Pena twice, and it was no answer. On the 4th, she started by calling Christina Pena. No answer. She called Lana, who they talked for 19 minutes, 48 seconds, and then Lana hung up. And then she called Lana 2 more times, and the call was not accepted. She then called her son twice, not accepted. Brian, who she talked to for 27 minutes, 36 seconds, and Brian hung up. She then called Lana, and you see it says PIN limit So she must have reached her prepaid limit. Then she called Lana back. This is on the 5th. They talked for 14 minutes and Lana hung up. So I wonder if she called or messaged and let her know she was maybe out of funds because she reached her PIN limit. Then on the 6th, she called someone that I think was named Rich. I'm not really sure. That's the only time she called that person. They hung up. Someone named Krista K. It doesn't show any time that they spoke. Someone named Kendra. They spoke for 30 minutes until the time was up. Someone named Alexis, not accepted. She then called Lana, and the inmate hung up after they almost hit the 30-minute limit. So Sarah hung up. Son, she called on the 6th, no answer. And then she called him again, not accepted. So no answer and then not accepted. And then she called Brian back to back, not accepted. You'll notice this pattern where she calls the son 8:32 at night, 8:34 at night. Then she tries Brian 8:36, 8:38. So every 2 minutes, she calls her son and Brian back to back 4 times. They didn't accept the call. So, this is common behavior from someone like her, where if you're not picking up the call at the moment that's convenient for them or they think you should be available, they call back to back. And that's what it looks like she's doing here. But they could be having dinner or be taking a shower or be at a loud event like a baseball game or something where it's not convenient for them to take your call right now because they're not incarcerated. They're allowed to go do things. All right, Lana, she calls on the 6th. They spoke for about 9 minutes and then Lana hung up. She calls Julian and speaks for almost 30 minutes. Julian hangs up. She calls her son. This is on the 7th. Not accepted. And again, she's doing that every 2 minutes. She calls son, 7:48 p.m. Then she calls Brian, 7:50 p.m. Then she calls her son, 7:52. And then she calls Brian, 7:54. So boom, 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 every 2 minutes. The first 3 calls were not accepted. The last one, someone talked to her for 54 seconds and then hung up. So Brian or her son answered the phone and said, hey, we're busy, can't talk right now, which you should have gotten that hint from 3 not accepted calls, but I guess we have to pick up and charge you out of your funds to tell you we can't talk right now. And then on the 8th, she starts off calling Peter. And both of those calls, 10 a.m. and 10:12, they were not accepted. This one is highlighted in yellow because if you notice over here, these are collect calls. So she tried to call Christina collect on the 8th at 10 and 10:14 and 10:15. And you notice it doesn't say not accepted or not no answer. It says CPIQ multi-way call block. So somebody blocked this number. So I find it interesting. Now, I did not highlight this orange. It came that way just because they were collect calls. They're the only 2 collect calls on this report. But I find it interesting that she must have run out of funds or whatever and try to call Christina collect. Or, when you call someone collect, you can leave a little quick message. Maybe she was trying to leave her a voicemail on the little recording. I don't know. All right. And then on the 8th, she calls Brian at 10:16, talked to him for 16 minutes. Then she called her son later on that night, 19:35, talked to him for 24 minutes. And that's everything on the 8th. On the 9th, she starts with calling Lana, 8:35 at night. They talk for almost 30 minutes. And then on the 10th, she starts by calling Peter. They talk for almost 30 minutes. Then she calls Lana on the 10th again at 9:15 at night. They talk for 10 minutes. And then she calls her son on the 11th, and the call was not accepted. And then her son again, no answer. So she called him about an hour apart that time instead of every 2 minutes. Maybe she's learning. On the 11th, she then called Brian. Oh, nope. She called her son at 4:17 in the afternoon. Then she calls Brian at 4:19. So it says inmate hung up, but there's no duration of call. And then she tries Christina again, not accepted. She calls Lana. They talk for almost 30 minutes. And Lana hangs up. and that was her last call on the 11th. On the 12th, she tries her son. It says not accepted. Then she tries Brian. She talks for 1 minute and 49 seconds, and then it says inmate hung up. She then calls her son, and it says pin limit. And then she calls her son not accepted, not accepted. She calls Brian, and it says time up after 20 minutes. So to me, that looks like she tried to call her son. He didn't accept it. She called Brian. She hit her pin limit. She had Brian put some funds on there so she could talk to her son. He put 20 minutes on there, and then it says time up. And then on the 12th, she tried to call Lana. It doesn't have a duration, and it says inmate hung up. And then she called Lana again a minute later. They talked for 30 minutes, and it says time up. On the 13th, Sarah tried calling Julian. It was not accepted. She then called Peter, not accepted. Christina Pena, not accepted. Someone named James, but it was not James Owens. It was James with the last name starting with N. And they spoke for 4 minutes, and then the caller hung up. She called Brian on the 15th, spoke for 45 seconds, and then Sarah hung up. She then called Julian, talked for 30 minutes, and then her time was up. She called Lana, talked for 29 minutes and 51 seconds, and then Lana hung up. She then called Lana again. It was not accepted. She tried Christina Pena. It was not accepted. And then she did get in touch with her son. They spoke for 30 minutes, and then time was up. We're halfway through January. On the 16th, she tried Julian. They talked for 15 minutes, and then time was up. She called Lana. It was not accepted. She called Lana again. It was not accepted. She called Lana again. These were fairly close together. Oh, the 16th, she called at 9:18 at night. It was not accepted. Then these two are on the 17th. So she called 20:52, 20:54. So 8:52, 8:54 at night. She didn't get her the first time. And then they talked for almost 30 minutes, and Lana hung up. Then on the 19th, she called her son. They talked for 29 minutes, 30 seconds. And her son hung up. Then she called Lana. They talked for about 13 minutes. Lana hung up. She, on the 20th, tried to call Brian. It was not accepted. Then she called Brian again a minute later. And he talked to her for about 3 minutes. Then she called her son. It says not accepted. She called Lana. It was not accepted. She calls Brian. It was not accepted. Then she, on the 21st, starts off the day by calling Julian, talks for 29 minutes, 40 seconds, and then it says the inmate hung up. Also on the 21st, she tried Brian. It was not accepted. Then she tried her son, not accepted. Then Brian, then her son, not accepted. And again, we see the pattern of 11:52, 11:54, 11:55, 11:57. So then she calls Lana on the 21st, not accepted. Brian again on the 21st, not accepted. Brian again, 1 minute later, not accepted. And then her son 2 minutes later, not accepted. On the 21st, she starts, let's see. No, this is still the 21st. She calls her son again, not accepted. No, she called Christina Pena, not accepted. Then her son, not accepted. Then Brian, they spoke for about 2 minutes. And then Brian hung up. Then she tried Christina Pena again, not accepted. Tries her son twice, not accepted. This is on the 21st, and then on the 22nd here. She called him and not accepted. Brian, she then tries on the 22nd. They talk for about 11 minutes, and then he hangs up. Then she calls Julian, not accepted. Brian says she hung up. Julian again, not accepted. This is all on the 23rd. Brian, not accepted. Brian, they've talked for about 19 minutes and Sarah hung up. Then on the 24th, she starts again with Julian. They talk for 16 minutes, 20 seconds. Julian hangs up. She calls Lana. They speak for almost exactly 30 minutes. Lana hangs up. That was on the 26th. On the 27th, she starts with Peter. They talked for about 4.5 minutes. Peter hangs up. On the 27th, she tries Lana. It was not accepted. She tries Christina Pena, not accepted. She tried her son. They talked for almost a 30-minute limit, and then her son hung up. On the 28th, she tries her son again. It's not accepted. She tries her son 2 minutes later, not accepted. Then she tries Christina, not accepted. Okay, so we'll go through the end of January here. On the 29th, she starts with Peter, not accepted. Then she tries Julian. They talk for 22 minutes, and Sarah hangs up. She tries Lana on the 29th, not accepted. Her son, not accepted. Then Lana again, not accepted. These are all on the 29th. On the 30th, she tries Lana. They talk for about 21 minutes, and then Sarah hangs up. And then this in the red, I think she was trying to call James Owens on the 30th of January because the number is a Pensacola area code, and I know that's where Mr. Owens works out of. And when I looked up on his website, the number she was dialing was just 1 digit off. So she tried, I think she was trying to call James Owens, but either way, she got no answer. And then she tried calling her son. She spoke for a full 30 minutes and then time was up. On the 31st, she called Lana, spoke for 2.5 minutes, and then Sarah hung up. And then again on the 31st, she calls Lana, spoke for almost 30 minutes, and Lana hung up. So that's all for January. And I made a little chart to show the totals. So I made a little chart to make it easier for us to see who she called the most and who picks up the most often. So for the month of January, she attempted calling Julian 12 times. The calls were accepted 6 times. So he accepts her calls an average of 50% of the time. For Peter, she attempted 7. He accepted 3. So 43%. For Lana, she attempted 30 calls. Lana accepted 16 of them. So Lana answered over 53% of the time. By far the most amount of calls made to anyone and the highest percentage of accepting. Christina Pena, she called 15 times. Christina accepted 0 times. 0% of the time, Christina has accepted her calls. Now, as the call logs go on, we'll see that Christina's number, I think, has changed, and that's why she wasn't able to get a hold of her. Brian, she attempted 22 times. He accepted 10 times, so 45% of the time. Her son, 27 times. He accepted 7 times, so 26% of the time. But that's not to say some of the time she called Brian that she wasn't talking to him as well. And then all the other calls were 7 and 3 of them were accepted. So 43% of the time. So let me know what you think of the first people Sarah reached out to once she got to Lowell, and why do you think she was calling them? What do you think about her phone habits so far? And if you like this video, let me know. I'll continue to do the rest of the months that I received in the public records request. Thank you so much for watching this video, and thank you so much to everyone who has subscribed. I just hit 500 subscribers. That's a huge milestone, so I really appreciate you guys watching my content. Hit the like and leave a comment if you have time, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.